They forced her to sing just to mock her. But when Abby's voice filled the room, their smug smiles vanished. The woman they once ridiculed left them completely speechless. Morning sunlight streamed into a modest suburban home in Oakdale, Connecticut. Abigail "Abby" Turner, 34, hummed softly as she packed lunches for her 2 children. Even in its quietness, her melody carried a surprising richness that hinted at something extraordinary. "Mom, you're doing it again," her 12-year-old daughter Emily said with a knowing smile. Abby stopped, realizing she'd been unconsciously singing an aria from Puccini's La Bohème. "Old habits," she replied with a gentle laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. The kitchen walls revealed little about Abby's past. Only a single framed photo tucked among family pictures gave a clue. Abby as a young woman at a grand piano, spotlight on her face, eyes closed in concentration. 15 years had passed since then, back when she had been Westmore Academy of Music's most promising vocal talent. Her husband of 13 years, Daniel, walked in and kissed her cheek. "The kid's music teacher mentioned you again yesterday," he said while pouring coffee. "She still can't believe you studied at Westmore." Abby smiled faintly. That was another lifetime. What few people knew was why Abby had left. Her path to stardom. She had been on the verge of an international career when her father suffered a devastating stroke. With no siblings and her mother long gone, Abby chose family over fame. "No regrets," she often told Daniel, but sometimes he'd catch her watching old performances online, her fingers conducting silently with the music. That afternoon, while sorting mail, Abby froze. An elegant cream envelope bore the gold seal of Westmore Academy. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. "Celebrating 25 years of musical excellence, Wang. The board requests the honor of your presence," she read aloud. Daniel studied her face. "The big anniversary gala." Abby scanned the invitation and shook her head. "I can't imagine why they'd invite me. I never even graduated." "Because you were extraordinary," Daniel said simply. That evening, Abby found herself watching her final recital on her laptop. Daniel appeared quietly. "You should go," he said. "I don't belong in that world anymore," Abby replied, closing the screen. "Maybe it's not about them," Daniel said gently. "Maybe it's about making peace with the part of yourself you've locked away." Later, Abby climbed into the attic and opened an old trunk. Sheet music, notebooks, and programs from her student days lay untouched. Among them, a composition she had written but never performed. She hummed the first few bars. The melody returned, like an old friend. The next morning, Abby typed a reply. "Thank you for including me. I would be honored to attend." Her finger hovered, then she pressed send. A door long closed was about to reopen. When the evening of the gala arrived, Daniel noticed her nerves as she smoothed a simple beige dress, the only formal attire she owned. "It's not about how I look," she whispered. "It's about facing the choice I made 15 years ago." "You have nothing to prove," Daniel reminded her as he dropped her at the Manhattan venue. Inside, the grand hall glittered with chandeliers and success. Distinguished alumni mingled with wealthy donors and renowned performers. Abby hesitated at the entrance, feeling like an outsider. Women in designer gowns glided by. Men in tuxedos discussed seasons at the Met and Carnegie Hall. "Abigail Turner? Is that really you?" Professor Eleanor Winters, her former vocal coach, embraced her warmly. What a wonderful surprise. Before Abby could answer, a commotion rose near the stage. A tall man with silver-streaked hair commanded attention, Lawrence Blackwood. Once her closest rival, now one of the most celebrated conductors in the country. "Abigail Turner." His voice cut across the crowd. "The prodigy who disappeared." Conversations fell silent as he strode forward, champagne in hand, his entourage trailing behind. His success showed in every confident gesture, every deferential glance cast his way. "Lawrence," Abby replied evenly. "When I heard you might attend," he said with a sly smile. I could hardly believe it. Lawrence's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And what have you been doing with all that potential?" he asked, letting the last word linger. A few of his companions exchanged knowing glances. "I've been living my life," Abby replied simply. How quaint, Lawrence sneered, gesturing toward a glamorous woman beside him. Olivia here has just completed her third world tour, and Marcus has been commissioned by the Vienna Philharmonic. Each introduction felt like a blade, cutting into the choices Abby had made and the path she hadn't taken. How fortunate for them, she answered, steady though the air around her grew heavier. As the night unfolded, Abby found herself cornered near the bar by Lawrence and his circle. Their questions sharpened like knives. Don't you miss it? Asked a woman who claimed to be a former classmate, though Abby could hardly place her. The applause, the recognition? Did you ever try to come back? Another inquired, feigning concern. I made my choice, Abby said. The words were beginning to tire her. My family needed me. Lawrence swirled his drink. We all face choices, Abigail. Some of us choose greatness. His quiet contempt stirred something in Abby. Not anger, but a sadness at how little he understood. When the formal program began, the hall thundered with applause for one name after another. Abby sat at the back, silent, unseen. Then Lawrence strode to the stage, his presence commanding instant attention. He spoke of sacrifice, of dedication, of the relentless pursuit of excellence. His voice rang with certainty. Talent, he declared, eyes sweeping the crowd, is nothing without the courage to pursue it relentlessly. And then his gaze found her. Some among us had that talent, but lacked the commitment to see it through. A ripple of whispers swept the audience as heads turned toward Abby. Lawrence smiled, sharp as a blade. In fact, tonight we have a unique opportunity. Among us sits someone whose voice once promised greatness, before she chose obscurity. The spotlight swung across the room, fixing on Abby's startled face. Abigail Turner, Lawrence announced, extending his hand toward her. Perhaps you'd honor us with a song, show us what might have been. Gasps and murmurs filled the hall. What he called an invitation was clearly a trap, dressed in mockery. I didn't come here to perform, Abby said, her voice steady though her heart pounded. Come now, Lawrence pressed, his voice booming through the microphone. Surely you remember how. Or has domestic life erased even that? Laughter bubbled up from sections of the audience. Not all, but enough to sting. Professor Winters rose, fury etched on her face, but Abby touched her arm gently. This moment had been building for 15 years. One song, Lawrence insisted, his challenge unmistakable. Unless, of course, you can't. Abby thought of Daniel, who still believed in her, of her children, who knew her only as Mom, not as the voice she once had been. Of her father, gone now, who never made her regret the path she chose. Very well, she whispered, rising from her seat. The walk to the stage felt impossibly long. Her plain beige dress stood in stark contrast to the glittering gowns around her. Whispers trailed in her wake. 15 years without training. She'll fall flat on her face. He's cornered her completely. Lawrence met her at center stage, bowing theatrically as he handed her the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he declared, Abigail Turner, returning to Westmore after 15 years. Leaning close, he whispered, try not to embarrass yourself too thoroughly. Abby stood before the sea of faces, her hands trembling, her pulse thundering. For a dreadful moment she feared her voice would betray her. Then she closed her eyes. She wasn't here, under a cruel spotlight. She was in her kitchen, singing to her children. In her garden, humming among the flowers. By her father's bedside, her voice soothing where words could not. Music had never left her. It had simply changed shape. I'll need a pianist, she said firmly. Lawrence waved toward the grand piano where a young man waited. Jonathan will accompany you. What will you be attempting? His emphasis on the word attempting drew a few chuckles. Abby ignored him and turned to the pianist. Do you know O mio babino caro? The young man nodded, his brows lifting in surprise. It was a beloved aria, but unforgiving to anyone unprepared. As the opening notes floated into the hall, Abby drew a deep breath. Her first note hung in the air, clear and unwavering. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. Lawrence's smile flickered. Her voice filled the hall with a richness that silenced every doubt. Yes, the technical brilliance was there. Perfect pitch, effortless control. But it was something deeper that held the room captive. Every note carried the weight of 15 years. Joy, sacrifice, grief, and love, woven into music too honest to ignore. Abby's voice didn't just tell Puccini's story of love. It told her own. Every note carried the truth of who she was, not a failed prodigy, but a woman who had chosen a different kind of fulfillment. In the front row, Lawrence sat rigid, his smugness dissolving into disbelief, then shock. The man with the gray beard who had mocked her earlier now leaned forward, lips parted in astonishment. Professor Winters pressed a handkerchief to her eyes, witnessing the full bloom of the talent she had recognized decades ago. All around, faces, reflected the same realization. This was not just technically perfect singing, it was profoundly moving. As Abby reached the aria's emotional peak, her voice soared with a power that seemed impossible for her slender frame. The final note rang out, crystalline, breathtaking, saturated with both technical brilliance and raw emotion. Silence followed. 1 heartbeat, 2, 3. The hall was suspended in awe. Then, like a spark igniting a blaze, Professor Winters rose. To her feet, tears streaming openly, and began to applaud. The wave spread. First a handful, then dozens, then the entire hall erupting in a thunderous standing ovation. Even seasoned musicians nodded in respect. Critics, already composing their glowing reviews in their minds, exchanged significant glances. Everyone was swept up in the moment. Everyone except Lawrence. He alone remained seated, his face betraying a storm of emotions, admiration battling against the collapse of the story he had spun about her. Abby stood at center stage, still as stone. The "Ube" applause washed over her, but she realized with startling clarity that she didn't need it. The joy had been in the singing itself, something she had denied herself for too long. When the ovation finally ebbed, she handed the microphone back to the MC and began to step down. "Wait," a voice called. Marcus Reed, the acclaimed composer, rose from his seat. "Would you consider one more? Perhaps something from Verdi?" Another renowned vocalist chimed in eagerly. "Or Mozart?" Abby smiled warmly but shook her head. "Thank you. That was enough." As she moved through the crowd, hands reached out to touch her arm, to offer praise, to marvel at what they had just witnessed. The same people who had ignored her hours earlier now saw her clearly. Lawrence finally stood, stepping into her path. His voice was quieter now, stripped of arrogance. "Abigail, I had no idea you'd maintain such excellence." She regarded him calmly. "You never understood what music meant to me, Lawrence. It was never about excellence." "We should talk," he urged. "With a voice like that, even after all these years, there are opportunities, connections I could help you make." Beneath his words was both sincerity and the familiar attempt to reassert control, to cast himself as gatekeeper to a world he assumed she still craved. Abby's smile was gentle but unyielding. "I appreciate the thought, but I already have a life I love. Music has always been part of it, just not in the way you understand." The rest of the evening unfolded like a dream. People who had dismissed her earlier now crowded around, eager for pieces of her story. She answered graciously but without apology for her choices. Some understood, others did not, but it no longer mattered. Later, by the great windows overlooking the city, Professor Winters approached. "I always wondered if you regretted your choice," the elderly woman admitted softly. Abby thought carefully before answering. "I regretted losing music as I once knew it, but I never regretted choosing my family." "You never truly lost it," Winters said. "Your voice has matured in ways it never would have otherwise. There's a depth now, something genuine that many technically flawless singers never find." Before Abby could reply, Lawrence reappeared, flanked by 2 board members of the New York Philharmonic. His tone was now polished, professional. "We're Considering a special showcase next month featuring distinguished alumni, he explained. You would be a highlight, a sensation overnight. One of the board members added eagerly. It was an open door back into the world she had walked away from. The temptation surprised her with its strength. I'm flattered, Abby said carefully. But my life is in Connecticut, my family. Arrangements can be made, Lawrence interrupted smoothly. Weekend rehearsals. We'll work around your domestic obligations. The slight condescension in his phrasing crystallized everything for Abby. My domestic obligations, as you call them, aren't burdens I work around, Lawrence. They're choices I embrace fully. She met his eyes. When was the last time you sang simply for the joy of it? Not for an audience, or critics, or reputation. The flicker of guilt on his face was answer enough. I don't need spotlights or reviews to remind me that music matters in my life, Abby said softly. Though I thank you for reminding me I've kept my voice hidden too long. As she prepared to leave, Professor Winters pressed a card into her hand. The community. Music school downtown is looking for a vocal instructor. 2 evenings a week, something to consider on your terms. Abby looked at the card, warmth blooming at the thought of teaching others to discover their voices. I might just do that, she said. Outside, the spring air felt cool and cleansing. She hummed softly to herself. Not Puccini, not Verdi, but a simple melody she had written years ago for her children. Daniel was waiting up when she arrived home. His eyes asked the question before his lips could. It was illuminating, Abby said, sitting beside him. She recounted the dismissal, the challenge, and the triumph that followed. Her eyes shone with a passion long dormant. They offered me opportunities, she finished. A chance at what might have been. And? Daniel asked gently. Abby took his hand. And I realized I don't want what might have been, I want what is, with just a little more music in it. Abby stood inside a small storefront in her town, gazing at the space that would soon become Turner Vocal Studio. Twice a week she would open the doors to children and adults, guiding them to discover their true voices. On her desk rested a framed review from the Westmore Gala, a glowing critique that had spread through musical circles describing her as a voice of rare emotional truth. Yet even more precious than the praise was the worn composition notebook beside it, filled with fresh melodies, pieces that wove her classical training with the wisdom of her years away from the spotlight. In the practice room, her daughter, Emily, was bent over the piano, picking out a tune with the same natural gift Abby had shown as a child. Mom, Emily called softly, can you help me with this part? Abby smiled, realizing that her legacy would not be measured in glittering performances or critical acclaim, but in moments like this, passing on the love of music to her own child. She began to sing, her voice filling the humble studio with as much beauty and passion as it once had in the grand concert hall. She understood now. Some choices aren't about what you give up, but about what you gain. Share your story with us. Where are you watching from? Did Abby's journey touch your heart? Don't forget to subscribe and join our community of listeners and storytellers who believe in second chances and rediscovering lost dreams. Think about it. How many of us have quietly set aside a part of ourselves, an art, a passion, a gift, while life's demands marched forward? The painter who put down her brushes to raise a family, the writer whose stories remain tucked in notebooks, the musician whose instrument sits in a dusty corner. Abby's rediscovery shows us that these dreams don't disappear. They wait, patient and silent, until we choose to breathe life into them again. And when we do, they don't return weaker. They return transformed, enriched by life's struggles, deepened by time. We've seen it in our own community. A retired teacher writing poetry after 40 years. A grandfather picking up his saxophone after decades of silence. A woman publishing her first book at 73. These aren't stories of regret. They're proof of the human spirit's resilience, of gifts that refuse to stay buried forever. So if Abby's journey stirred something inside you, a whisper of a forgotten dream, listen to it. That's your soul reminding you of who you've always been. Until our next story, remember, the most powerful note often comes after the longest silence.